This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. Great to be with you today. A little bit of snow sprinkles here in New York. Maybe we're heading for a white Christmas. Love to see it. Not enough snow, but one can only hope. Anyway, thanks for listening. You can hear this broadcast, by the way, this radio broadcast on the internet. All you have to do is live stream us, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. You hear us all around the country, throughout the world, all over the solar system. That includes the Milky Way, everywhere. And please, folks, if you can, dial us up during the week on Fabulous Fox Business Network. The name of the show is Kudlow, and it plays 4 to 5 p.m. every day live. 4 to 5 p.m. every day live on Fox Business Network, Fabulous Fox Business Network. And if for some reason you can't get there at 4, please text your favorite 9-year-old, and she will show you how to DVR the show, and you will never miss a thing. So we've got some very interesting things cooking here. I guess I'm going to start. I don't know how many people really follow this stuff, but, you know, the government shutdown crisis drama playing in Washington, D.C. this past week, it was resolved last night when they voted to pass another big spending bill. I should be, look, I happen to like Speaker Mike Johnson. I like him a lot. And he's got tough deal because Republicans have a very, very slim majority in the House. I understand that. President Trump and Elon Musk stopped a really bad bill in the vote on, I guess it was Thursday, which that was that 1,500-page bill. Nobody knows what was in that bill. Nobody even knows how much that bill is going to spend. Nobody knows. And so some slimmed-down bill finally got passed last night. But it got passed mostly because Democrats lined up behind it. I think about 35 Republicans in the House voted against it. Why'd they do that? Well, because, first of all, it was too much spending. And there's no offsets. PAYGO is the phrase. PAYGO is the phrase. And that just means they're pay-go or pay for. If you add spending someplace, like say you want to spend more on the hurricane relief, okay, or farm relief, then you should cut spending someplace else, right? Increase spending here, you should cut it over there. All right, that's called pay-go or offsets. And you know what? Nobody does that anymore. Nobody. It's thrown out the window. So what happens? We just spend more. Now, this bill spends about $110, $120 billion above the so-called baseline for, it was $100 billion, as I understand it, and don't quote me precisely, because really nobody knows yet. I mean, they pass these bills. Nobody has time to read them. But I think there was about $100 billion of hurricane relief, some such, and $30 billion of farm relief. I don't know if those numbers are precise, but it's ballpark. Okay. I'm not gonna sit here and say they shouldn't have given them hurricane relief. Just color me skeptical that you needed 100. Like, why not 50? Nobody debated that. just all this last-minute rush, beat the clock. Government was going to shut down. 12:01, midnight, 12:01. Of course it didn't Shutdowns don't even matter. You're still going to get Social Security and your health care and defense. It's just a bunch of non-essential workers get furloughed. They get paid later when the government resumes. I don't even want to take the time to go through that. These shutdowns have no consequences except politics. So they spend anyway. The point is they're spending more money and increasing more federal debt. Elon Musk, I think, tweeted out yesterday or last night, is this a Republican or Democratic bill? The reality was, I guess you could say it was both, but it was mostly a Democratic bill. Because not all their wish list, but a good chunk of their wish list was in there. At least they took out this crazy, State Department Global Engagement Center, which was what the Biden administration used to censor conservative thought in the U.S. and overseas. All right. And they did take out the cost of living pay raise, which, by the way, the COLA is 4%. I mean, you've had Bidenflation over 20% the last 4 years. But this is the wrong time to give Congress a pay hike. I get that. The debt ceiling. Now, here's the thing. Let me just say, you have these debt limits, and this was one of the forcing devices. The debt limit, I guess, hits January 20th or 25th, right around the end of the month, right around President Trump's inauguration. President Trump came out this week in favor of abolishing the debt limit. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. It is phony. He called it quicksand. He's exactly right. And I worked as a National Economic Council director for Mr. Trump for his first term years ago. A long time ago, I was assistant director of the Office of Management and Budget under Reagan. I know about this stuff. Democrats always use this to get their spending, added spending. They hold up the whole process. It is quicksand. And then they go through this rigmarole about shutting down the government. It's a Democratic play. You go back and look at history, it's mostly Democrats who love debt ceilings and use it as a threat, as a tool to threaten the Republicans. We'll close down the government if you don't give us more money. Back in, if I get this right, 2019, I'm pretty sure it was 2019, when I was in there, we had a government shutdown for about 30, 35 days. But it was over? Building the wall to stop illegal immigration. It was Democrats holding up the government, not passing a debt bill or a short-term spending bill because the money for the wall was in there. The wall was a very good idea then. Mr. Trump's wall's a very good idea now. I mean, they're now selling off parts of the wall, right? They're selling off any loose equipment or whatever. How pathetic is that? And how wrong is that? And how badly did Democrats get clobbered in this last election because of their open border policies that Mr. Trump wants to end? That includes deportation of illegal immigrants who are criminals. And that includes busting through sanctuary cities. The federal laws supersede the local laws. New York City, get ready. Illinois, get ready. California, get ready. Anyway, I digress. But my point is, get rid of the debt ceiling. Nobody pays any attention to it, and it has not stopped spending, okay? Here's my point. The size and scope of the federal government must be curbed. Now, one way to do that is pro-growth tax cuts. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But we spend too much, and that's why we have so much debt. We are now moving through $36 trillion of federal debt. Nobody wants to cut spending. Nobody wants to even go for what they call, pay-fors or pay-go. You increase spending here. If you have a need for more spending, let's say you want to increase military spending, okay? Cut spending elsewhere. Let's say you want to increase hurricane spending. All right, I'm no expert. Maybe the folks down in North Carolina and so forth need the money. I don't know that, but let's assume they do. Then cut spending elsewhere. There's plenty. It's what's the budget? $6 or $7 trillion. I don't have it in front of me. I should know that. Maybe somebody over here, one of the producers, will find out what the federal budget is for 2023 or 2024. Anyway, you couldn't cut 10 cents on the dollar someplace. Of course you could. And Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will do that. But Trump is right. Get rid of the debt ceiling. It's a democratic weapon to hold up the government to spend more money. All of their big government socialism. I completely agree with Mr. Trump on this point. Debt ceilings just... And let me add one more point. President Trump doesn't want the debt ceiling hanging over his agenda. He takes office January 20th, less than a month. God, we can't wait. He shouldn't have to worry about the debt ceiling that was created by, bad Republican and Democratic deals. He's got to cut spending. He's got to cut taxes. He's got to put more money into the pockets of his blue-collar working-class coalition so we can get a blue-collar boom going. There we go. $6.2 trillion. So I was right. I said it was $6 or $7 trillion. Good for me. Saturday morning, my brain's still a little fogged up here. But that was it. $6 trillion. You tell me we couldn't find some offsets for the $6.2 trillion federal budget? Of course we could. The budget is 24% of the economy, 24% of GDP. You know what it was averaging for the last 50 years? 20. I think the GDP is about, $25 trillion, $26 trillion. So don't tell me you can't cut spending. And let's get rid of this goofy debt ceiling bill, which is, again, Democratic quicksand to pull everybody down, government shutdowns and threats. The Washington Monument's going to close, blah, blah, blah. No, it won't. Social Security wouldn't even be affected, blah, blah, blah. It's all phony baloney. We go through this every year. Get rid of it. Trump is 100% right. 100% right. At least this bill they passed last night is a lot smaller than the first bill. But you know what? Elon Musk was right. It's basically a Democratic bill. I think about 35 Republicans voted against it, mostly the Freedom Caucus conservatives. I had Senator Rand Paul on the show last night talking about this, why we can't cut spending. Rand's right. Rand's always been very, very good on this. He's a conservative libertarian, stand-up guy, smart guy, good-looking guy. I like him very much. He's a personal friend of mine going back many years. His father, Rand Paul, what was Rand Paul's dad's name? Ran for president. He was a congressman from Texas. Somebody found, I'm blanking on his father's name. Ron Paul, of course, thank you. Kelvin's on a tear this morning. Kelvin is on a tear. Ron Paul is a congressman, long time from Texas. Gold guy, advocate of sound money, good man. Anyway, Rand Paul's a good man. And he was saying, why don't we cut spending? That's the issue. It's not the debt ceiling. The last thing I'll say is, I'm going to take a quick break and come back. Last thing I'll say is, one of the things this shows, the chaos and the drama and the difficulties of just getting a simple, short-term funding bill through. In the last 3 days, all the chaos, votes, 2 failures, they got it on the third. This shows you why and how hard it's going to be to get fiscal bills next year called reconciliation, spending and taxing. Reconciliation. And people in the Senate and people in the administration, the transition, think you can get 2 or even 3 reconciliation bills, and they want to put tax cuts last, is a terrible idea. This is a perfect example. My point is simplify, simplify, simplify. You're only going to get one bite out of the apple. Get those tax cuts right up front. Put in the border money, absolutely. Put that border money in. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. But as a source close to President Trump told me, President wants one big, fat, beautiful reconciliation bill. And what you saw in the last few days is the difficulty and almost the futility of getting good economic bills, fiscal spending and taxing bills. They couldn't even do it for a short-term funding bill, for heaven's sakes. What would they do for a gigantic reconciliation funding bill that would have tax cuts in it and hopefully lots of spending cuts for a change? Simplify, simplify, simplify. I take a break on that. When I come back, I want to talk about that. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Get those tax cuts in. Get rid of the debt ceiling. Start reducing spending, the size and scope of the federal government, and the regulatory state for the Doge brothers. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, everybody. So I want to talk some more about this crazy spending bill and what it does and doesn't mean. But look, here's the thing. It should be the difficulty of getting this short-term bill, okay, should be a warning of getting a large, many reconciliation bills next year. So you've got people in the Senate and people in the administration, the Trump administration, saying we're not going to have one bill. We're going to have two, maybe three reconciliation bills. What's a reconciliation bill? It's a big fiscal package. It only requires 51 votes in the Senate and a simple majority in the House. But it's a big fiscal year-end package. Here's my point. You see how hard it is with the slim majority of Republicans in the House? There's a message here. You're not going to get two or three reconciliation packages next year. You're only going to get one bite out of the apple. Do not delay the tax cuts. Do not delay the tax cuts. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Forget two bills or three big bills next year. Assume you're only going to get one bill. And in that bill must be the Trump tax cuts. Not only extending the Trump tax cuts of 2017, but putting in the tax cut for cash tips for service workers, the tax cut for overtime workers, the tax cut for Social Security for seniors. Get it all in there. Get the full expensing provision, put the 15% corporate tax, that's new. All that should go into one reconciliation bill that would include the money for stopping illegal immigration at the border. Simplify, simplify, simplify. That's the lesson that we should have learned from the chaos of this short-term continuing resolution. I want blue-collar workers and working folks to get more money in their pockets. I want the blue-collar boom right away.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
So let's talk some politics about the whole story here. And by the way, I want to add, besides all this funding business, shut down the government business, Sleepy Joe. Turns out Sleepy Joe is even sleepier Joe. Holy cow. Guy didn't talk to anybody while I was president. Big Wall Street Journal article. Very good article for the WSJ newsroom. Anyhow, we got two of the best. Joe Concha, Fox News contributor, got a new book out. Pre-order The Greatest Comeback Ever Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign. God, I can't wait. And my longtime pal David Webb, who is also a Fox News contributor and a Sirius XM talk show host. David Webb, does your radio show it's got to have a title, doesn't it?
Just my name, Larry. I'm like Larry Kudlow. I've emulated the great Larry, and I just call it David Webb.
With an exclamation point. David.
For emphasis.
All right, fellas. Thank you for doing this pre-Christmas show. I'll start with you, David Webb. These short-term funding continuing resolutions shut down the government stuff. Let me say a couple things. Number one, spending goes up, not down. Nobody pays for anything anymore. Number two, debt ceilings should be abolished. Trump is completely right. All they do is create democratic mischief. Trump calls it quicksand for government shutdowns to hold Republicans hostage for more spending. And number three, my last point, and I'll let you guys carve it out, is that, this shows you how hard it is to get stuff through, particularly the House. So therefore, we should not expect to do 2 or 3 reconciliation bills, fiscal reconciliation bills next year. Do one bill, get the tax cuts in there to help the middle class boom, get the wall, border spending money, put it all together. A source close to Mr. Trump is telling me he wants one big, beautiful reconciliation bill. So that's what I say. David Webb, it's all yours. Go.
No, look, this is a case, as you have seen yourself in the first administration and long time before that, Larry, of how do you keep moving the ball forward? And I have been beating up congressmen on all sides for the last few days on my radio show. I give them credit for coming in for the beating because that's what they're there for. They have failed for too long to get back to regular order, something you and I talk about a lot.
Yes.
And I know Joe does too. They have for too long keep kicking the can down the road. So what I see this as in the totality or in the end of this 118-page bill is not what we would like to see, but we haven't gotten across the end zone. We've moved the ball down the field. And that football terminology, they got to play offense on conservative governance, on conservative fiscal economics, defense to some of those light blue congressmen from the Republican side. And then we need some special teams. Well, that's DOGE. That's the effort. That's the demand of the American people and the president-elect, who frankly is acting more like the president than the current president. Oh, hang on, I should check. Is he awake yet? Because he's got something to sign. Maybe he can do electronically from his bedside with his sippy cup. But the sad part is we have to take these steps. And next year, President Trump is right. One bill. And to all these committees and subcommittees, clean this crap up. Let me say it for what it is. Clean it up. Give us clean bills. Put it on the record. I'm not worried about Democrats and what they think, what they say about Republicans. Do what's right for the American people that elected you.
I like the regular order. It's very important, but they don't do it. I mean, for listeners who are not familiar with all this, regular order just means pass the 12 appropriation bills on time. And you don't have to have these omnibus bills at the last minute in these government shutdown battles. Joe Concha, I have been campaigning, crusading for 2 weeks on the TV show, and you've heard it and seen it, and you come on the show and you're a regular. I want one reconciliation bill next year. I want the tax cuts in that bill. Put the border money in that bill. I'm fine. Use both. Do not split them off because you see the chaos of even getting a small bill.
Yeah.
I mean, this bill is about $600-700 billion current services baseline, plus 120 or 130 billion for the new spending on hurricane relief and farm relief, with no offsets. If you're dealing with a $7 trillion budget, which is what's going to happen next year, and you want to put the tax cuts in, otherwise you're not going to get 2 bills. Look what happened in the House. You barely get this thing through. You'll never get 2 bills. So I say simplify, 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 Joe.
And when Larry Kudlow campaigns like you did against Build Back Better, killed the bill over and over, and it worked. Manchin was watching. He was listening.
I did win that one.
You did. And you're not even elected. You're like Elon Musk. You're like controlling policy without even with
very
one vote.
Very kind.
Of course. Yeah, look, I hope to see that as well, but when you have such a slim majority, it's Republicans that have to listen to Larry Kudlow on this one. They have to stick together, or else, Democrats, not one is going to come over, and we know that. They're just very good at sticking together as opposed to Republicans. It doesn't matter who the House Speaker is, by the way. You can blame Mike Johnson all you want. You blame Kevin McCarthy. When you tried to replace McCarthy, you went through like 5 people before you got to Johnson. Removing him is not the answer, all right? But I think with Trump in office, I think people will get in line a lot faster. Now, all of this said, if you're Vivek Ramaswamy and you're Elon Musk and you are heading up DOGE and you expect to cut what? They want $2.5 trillion in cuts for things they deem to be wasteful, because they probably are. They're going to have a lot of problems, because to your point, this bill was small and you had a lot of resistance in terms of cutting spending. Imagine what's going to happen when Musk and Ramaswamy make these recommendations and then suddenly everybody gets weak-kneed. And by the way, this isn't a party thing. Democrats spend like drunken sailors and Republicans are not far behind either. Neither party has shown in decades that they have the ability to cut spending when it really can be painful and really could affect their reelection efforts, because, well, everybody hates spending until it affects their own district. And that's where we're going to have to see some people step up and really show some courage. But I have a feeling it's not going to happen.
You know, that point, the $2.5 trillion, now that's interesting. That is not in the bill. It was a handshake. And I think, I'm trying to track this down, but I'm pretty sure in the Republican conference meeting, I think Speaker Mike Johnson shook Chip Roy's hand. Chip Roy, Freedom Caucus, Texas. He was formerly chief of staff for Senator Ted Cruz. Anyway, it wasn't really, I'm pretty sure, guys, it wasn't in the so-called committee print. It wasn't in the bill that will be signed by Sleepy Joe or whatever. So that's interesting. And you're going to have a big fight about that later on. So I totally agree. And I'm just saying, be serious. You know, a lot of stuff you have to do. Mr. Trump has a big agenda. But you've got to get more money. You got to fatten middle-class wallets. You got to get more money in the hands of middle-class working folks, of lower middle-class working folks, of Hispanics and blacks and young kids. Because that's, David Webb, that's who elected Trump. And my point is, you have to start right away. Don't tell them, wait, we have other agenda items. And believe me, I want to close the border too. But don't tell them we'll get to your thing in June and July, which means it won't get passed until the end of the year and maybe won't get passed at all. Tell them right off the top, you voted for us because of the economy. We're going to help you and pass these tax cuts, both 1.0 and 2.0, the new tax cuts and the old tax cuts, and we're going to fatten your wallets and get you the money right away so we can start a blue-collar boom, David Webb, this year. You follow me? This year. So it's fully in place, right? Because for 8 years ago in 2017, they got they got the tax cuts because they started late in September, and they got the tax cuts done on the last day of December, and it didn't have an impact in 2018, and they got clobbered in the midterm elections, among other things. Anyway, I've said I'll hand over to you, David Webb, but that's where I'm thinking.
No, you're not only just thinking it, we're going to be able to act on it. I really believe this. In a little perspective, Larry, for the first time in a long time, I've seen a response by Congress to the American people. If you want to put it, the middleman is Elon Musk and ex-Vivek, Doge, and Donald Trump, the president-elect. But as you know, back in the Tea Party days, we were outside. Now we're at the table. And to your point, the difference between the congressmen and the senators is that there's someone now who can wield a great deal of activism at the table in Doge, whether it's Elon or Vivek or any part of the panel that's being put together, the House caucus, the Senate caucus. I can tell you, I've been talking to the guys on the House Doge caucus, and there is a lot more coming from the people who are planning to do things, and they can't wait. And I've made this point to congressmen. You want to be reelected, you now have no window of controlling the media through going out into the rotunda, because there's a bigger platform and the American people are there. And you've got to deliver for those people. They're not going to buy what they voted for Donald Trump about on the economy, making their lives better. They're going to blame you for failing him, thereby failing them. But now, for the first time that I've seen in my modern times, we're going to flip the Reagan script in a good way in this case, where instead of trust but verify, we're going to verify before we even trust you, and we're going to act. For those listening, if you haven't read the Wall Street Journal piece put out on November 20th, I believe it was, by Elon and Vivek, with the law, the justifications, the laws, the rescissions, all the things that can be done by the executive.
Takes down the regulatory state. That's the biggest single thing. It's fun. That's so important. People should go back, and it's great that you can on a Saturday morning remember the date. But that long piece lays that they want to end this big government socialist regulatory state. That's really what they want to do, and it's a huge thing. Can I just ask David Webb? I want to get to Joe Concha on another matter, but David, who do you like? You mentioned Doge congressman. Who are the good leaders there? Do you think?
Well, the co-chairs, and I had Pete Sessions on my show yesterday.
Okay. Pete Sessions, right? I know Pete.
Yeah, and Pete's got the right ideas.
Yep.
There's some good people coming in from the outside. This is something else is key. I know one of the players coming in from the outside on House, and this is someone I've known for 20 plus years that I trust to help them do the job because they need that outside push.
Yeah, no, Pete Sessions is great. By the way, he's married to a brilliant woman also. Joe Concha, media-wise, I'm watching Democrats now attacking Elon Musk and saying Elon Musk is the real president. They are totally paranoid about Elon Musk, Joe Concha.
Yeah, I guess what they've done is they've swapped out Vladimir Putin. Right? Like, he was the puppet master for Trump. And now
That's
Musk
fabulous.
runs Trump.
That's fabulous.
Memo to all the Democrats listening to the show. No one runs Donald Trump. Do you get that by now?
Oh,
so this is all to drive a wedge between the two. And
did you just make that up? You just thought of that? That's just fabulous.
Yeah, organically, that just kind of hit me because that's all I heard for 8 years. Putin controls Trump. That's not working, guys. All right, we'll say Elon controls Trump. No, Trump controls Trump.
Nobody
they'll never get
controls
it.
Trump.
Exactly, dude. I
His
mean,
ego's
that's it.
bigger than Elon Musk's billions. Let's put it that way.
Of course. You got to go to break, Larry, so let's
all right, we're going to go to break. You're exactly right. Joe Concha's so great. Joe Concha, Fox News contributor. On order, folks. His book, The Greatest Comeback Ever, Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign. David Webb, Fox News contributor. David Webb Show on Sirius XM Talk Show Radio. I'm just merely Kudlow. We'll be right back.
Larry Kudlow. From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
And we're talking politics with two of the very best of the best. Joe Concha, Fox News contributor. Joe's new book on order, The Greatest Comeback Ever, Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign. And David Webb, Fox News contributor, and the David Webb Show, Sirius XM Talk Show host. Joe Concha, I want to just spend a second more on the Democrats attacking Elon Musk. And because stories in the paper or someplace, not only is Elon having a tremendous impact here, but he's also maybe having a tremendous impact in England, the United Kingdom. He may help Nigel Farage upset the whole Tory party, which is in complete decay and have done terribly stupid things. Labour Party's even worse over there. But this attack on Elon Musk, from a media standpoint, you think this is going to be it? I mean, you see all this. Is this going to be their mantra for the next, bunch of weeks and longer? Yeah,
as more and more people, Larry, turn off legacy media. I mean, the numbers that I am seeing from places like CNN, MSNBC, who are pushing this narrative most. I mean, CNN can't even get 400,000 people on average to watch their network. That's an average of 8,000 people per state. You know how hard that is when you're in 100 million homes for that few people to be watching? So, yeah, they want to go keep doing this stuff over and over again, creating these boogeymen, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's Vladimir Putin. It's the opposite seems to happen ultimately. So the more they attack Musk, I mean, look, people like successful people. Elon Musk is such a great success story as far as everything with Starlink and SpaceX and obviously Tesla. Have you seen Tesla stock since the election, by the way? It's going through the roof.
Right.
So people like that. Instead, we see Tim Walz. You remember him, the goofy 80s sitcom dad who was the pick of Kamala Harris to be a running mate? He did an interview last week where he said, I can't understand why our message didn't resonate. He goes, I'm the poorest person as far as governors are in this country. I barely have any assets in terms of real estate or investments. And And I could relate to people. And it's like, wait, no one wants to hear how unsuccessful you are and how stupid you are not for investing.
That's a good point. Old, you know, right? that's you know what? That's 100%. That's a Trump point, too. You know, because people like Trump because of his success. They don't dislike. I mean, there's always this false, small sliver on the far left, but the rest of the country wants successful people. David Webb, Musk, I believe Musk is a great force for good. And I wanted to get your take on that because it looks like he's going to be around. You know, he's living in a cottage on the grounds at Mar-a-Lago among his other residences. But I'd see him as a big force for good, David Webb.
This goes to who Elon Musk is. And Joe's already made a number of these key points, right? His various business successes. But at the core of that is who the man is. Are there billionaires on the left? Of course there are, and billionaires on the right, and billionaires somewhere else on the spectrum. But at the core of who he is, Elon Musk wants things to be better for people out there. He's a brilliant mind, but he's a brilliant person, a brilliant heart. If you think about Neuralink, which doesn't get a lot of attention, the fact that we now have someone who's able to function better because of Neuralink that Musk has brought to the world. When you look at what he's doing and the people who work for him and their goals, it's a team of successful people who people feel, you know what, I'd rather have that than to the point of, why do I want to emulate the poorest guy in the room when in America we want to be emulating and maybe becoming one of the richest, most successful guys or girls in the room. And at all of that, Musk could use his money like Alexander Soros does for evil, but that's the difference between the two. It's not the money, it's the man.
Yeah, well put. Joe Concha, the Wall Street Journal story that we were talking about briefly before, Sleepy Joe was even sleepier. He didn't talk to his Treasury Secretary. He didn't talk much to his Defense Secretary. He wouldn't talk to the head of the House Democrat House Armed Services Committee before Afghanistan, Adam Smith, who was going to warn him. I mean, I know we all know that Sleepy Joe was Sleepy Joe, but this article, I think, you know, it was even worse. He was even sleepier. They couldn't even prep him for the interview with Robert Hur on the classified documents.
I'm just floored by this, that this is the biggest scandal in modern presidential history by far. I mean, you're telling me Admiral Smith could not get Joe Biden on the phone before that withdrawal. Don't forget, like, getting a one-on-one meeting. On the phone, they couldn't get this guy. Overall, you know how many cabinet meetings, full cabinet meetings, Joe Biden has held as president? 9 in 4 years.
Wow.
He's held one full cabinet meeting this year, where I'm pretty sure a lot's been going on in the world. And the fact that he was just hidden from even his own cabinet. Forget everything else. It matters because people died in Afghanistan. That's why it matters. October 7th happens. That's why it mattered. Inflation going to 40 years high. That's why it matters. This impacted people's lives or even got people killed. So, you know, in the end, this is the worst president of our lifetimes. If you're under 50, certainly, because then you have to go back to Nixon, I guess. And if you weren't born, you're born after him, then you've just witnessed and lived through the worst president of our lifetimes. And oh, by the way, this year, from a media perspective, he's held 0 solo press conferences. 0. So good riddance, Joe Biden. We still got 30 days to live with this. I made this point on the air before. He went away this past Tuesday to Delaware until Thursday. Why? Midweek? It's not a holiday week yet. Why is he going there? So it's just, I'm sorry. I have no sympathy for this person or the people around him who aided this whatsoever. I hope they never work in government again, quite frankly.
It's really something, David Webb. I've only got 25 seconds, but they lied to us. They lied even more than we knew they lied. And that's a good reason. Joe is right. Never again should these people go anywhere near the levers of power.
And anyone who propped him up and lied about him, whether it was Joe Scarborough, you name it, they all propped up this lie. Never trust any of them again, including KJP, the most notable black diversity hire in the country.
Including John Kirby, the foreign policy guy.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to try to find John Carney, Breitbart business editor, Business Digest. But I tell you, we had some very weird stuff today, this past week, rather, in the in the stock market and the Federal Reserve, it's a very strange story. So Jay Powell, the head of the Fed head, chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell gets up there, and all right, we got Carney. So I'm going to let John Carney do it. He'll do it better than I'm going to do it. John is Breitbart editor for economics and finance and co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest, regular on the TV show, regular on the radio show. Must read Business Digest. So, John, even the Wall Street Journal, I'm looking here, the editorial, I guess it was Thursday, the Fed admits an inflation mistake, and then the subheader, yet the central bank still cuts its target rate by another 25 basis points, and then its explanation isn't convincing. And the market, that's pretty good for the editorial page, and the market fell 1,100 points. What's going on here with this Fed story? How do you read it?
So one thing that I want to just take a step back and say, remember 3 years ago, the Fed announced that inflation would be transitory, that it would go away. Well, the most recent projections show that they think we are going to have 2.5% inflation up through the end of next year. So in other words, 6 years later, inflation will still be elevated, and yet they have cut rates three times in a row, one of them being the outrageous 50 basis point cut back in September. The Fed really has more or less admitted that they haven't gotten inflation under control, that it's not coming down even to their target in any normal, decent time span. And Larry, as you have pointed out, because we have run ahead of target for so long, that means prices are never getting back to a normal level. You actually need to run below target if you're going to get back to the trend level and for prices to feel normal again. Instead, we're going to run above target really as far as the eye can see, because they think it till the end of next year we'll have high inflation. And I don't really trust that they have any visibility beyond next year.
For middle-class working folks, again, the upper classes don't really care that much. We got a lot of liquidity, and I'll talk about that.
Stock market has been doing well,
right.
So
exactly. But did I get this right? Their so-called dot plot, they're saying they won't hit the 2% target now until when? Until like 2027? Is that possible? Is that right?
Yes.
That's insane.
It sounds ridiculous. But yes, what they are saying is, remember that they first declared it transitory in 2021, and now they are saying they will not hit the target until 2027. And yet they cut, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. I think what happened was, frankly, the cut was actually political, that they really wanted to try to announce that inflation could be over prior to the election to give Kamala Harris a better chance of winning. I can't figure out any other explanation. And then they had to cut in November and they had to cut in December, or else it would have been too embarrassing. But frankly, this is embarrassing. This is them admitting that it was a mistake. I would not be surprised if, look, Donald Trump's economic policies might rescue us from this by creating more on the supply side. But if we don't get that soon enough, we may start to get inflation going higher. The Fed is actually predicting that inflation will be higher at the end of 2025 than it is right now. So they think inflation is going up, and yet they cut rates.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I'm looking at it. PCE inflation, yeah, slightly higher. That's a really key point that deserves some visibility, that Mr. Trump may inherit Bidenflation, which is, in some sense, I know government spending was a big part of it.
Absolutely.
And those spending baselines are still going up, but the Federal Reserve is a big part of it, too. It was pointed out to me by, Kevin Warsh, former Fed governor, maybe a future Fed chairman. I was on the phone with him this week. The money supply is starting to grow again. The most it's grown in a couple of years. It's not growing at 30, but it is growing back to 5%. And the other thing is, John Carney, the Fed's balance sheet, which is really the source of all the money and liquidity in the system, that thing years ago, before the financial crisis, was less than $1 trillion balance sheet. It's like a bank. Okay, banks have balance sheets. Households have balance sheets. What do you want? Anyway, they're at 7. They got as high as 9 trillion during the pandemic. They're at 7 trillion now. But what they should be doing is moving that down to 5 trillion or 4 trillion. In other words, if you're worried about high prices, you should be draining money. And it's not about interest rates per se. It's about how much money is sloshing around the system. Now, you and I haven't really talked about this, but this is the basic, used to be called the monetary base. And they're only doing it slowly amounts. I mean, it would take forever to get it back down. I see that as one of the problems, and I think a new Fed chairman would have to deal with that.
I think that's right, Larry, that not paying attention to the quantity of money has been one of the big mistakes this Fed has made. Because if you watch it pretty closely, every time the quantity of money starts to grow, we get inflation growing. It's almost old-fashioned at this point. People haven't really looked at quantity of money since like the Volcker years. They've been so fixed on the the rate changes and whether it's going up or down. But I do think the quantity of money matters, and you're absolutely right. It's started to go back up, and this means that we're going to get very little disinflation coming at all. And so inflation's hasn't come down for 6 months. The Fed doesn't think it's coming down at all. And I think that is a burden that the Trump administration is going to face because the people want inflation to come down. But it is you can bring it down through fiscal and regulatory policy by expanding the supply side of the economy. But when you have a Fed that is cutting rates and therefore feeding the demand side, you actually end up, this is something that almost is unique in history, where we may have a Fed that is looser than the executive branch, the president of the United States wants it to be. Typically, it's been the opposite, where you have the president, worried that the Fed is tightening too much and is going to, not. Reagan worried at the beginning of the Reagan administration that Volcker's tightening might actually hurt him. It turned out to benefit him because when inflation came down, people were a lot happier.
That's right.
They were worried early on. That's not the case now. The Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, people are worried that too much inflation will damage their agenda.
Yes, I think so. Right. The Reagan years, the tax cuts produced more goods on the supply side, and Volcker produced less money. So demand came down, supply went up, and the inflation rate dropped to about 2% by the mid-'80s. Right. That's what you want. So you know what, John, the stocks fell Wednesday on Jay Powell's announcement of all this gobbledygook. Nobody knows what the hell he's talking about. Nobody could figure it out, scratching their heads. If you see more inflation, why are you cutting rates? It was really just I think you said this on our TV show, it was a big vote of no confidence in Powell, period.
That's right. Actually, I laughed a little when you said that the Wall Street Journal said that his explanation wasn't persuasive. I would say it wasn't comprehensible. I had no idea what any of that gobbledygook meant. And I think that's actually why the market fell, because if you can tell the market what you're doing and why, and it makes sense, then investors know what to do with it. What happened this week on Wednesday was people listened to what Powell said. They saw the dot plot say inflation isn't going down, and then they saw the Fed cut as well and said, none of this makes any sense. I lack confidence in the ability of the Fed to manage the economy, and that's why the stock market fell so much. And
bond yields went up anyways. I mean, that's another vote of no confidence. Anyway, John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance, and folks, co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest, which is daily. You can get it. It's a must-read. So just about the best product out there. We're going to take a quick break because we're ready to take a break. On the other side, my good friend Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reform, why we must get the tax cuts up first. I'm Kudlow. We'll take a break.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
So let's talk a little bit more about Mr. Trump's tax cut and pro-growth agenda, what I call the potential for a blue-collar boom. But we want that boom to start this coming year, not next year or the year after, not 2026 or 2027. We welcome back to the show dear friend and great supply-sider Grover Norquist, the founder and the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thank you for this. Your article, Republicans can kiss their House majority goodbye if they delay Trump's tax cuts. And by the way, Grover, I was talking earlier in the show and on the TV show last night, Republicans in the House, you saw how hard it was to just get a small short-term funding bill through. Imagine if you're talking about several reconciliation bills. It's absolutely impossible, and the tax cuts could be buried underneath that. What you think?
No, that's exactly it. It is such a narrow majority that the Republicans have. There are some people that Trump is putting into the cabinet that may be delayed, so maybe we could still hold on to them for a little bit. But if they go in, then it's 3 months before you get their return. You've got 1, 2, 3 vote margin. You need every single Republican. People get sick. People have car accidents. We could lose them permanently to life. Things happen, and we need to move quickly to pass the tax cut. That bill, the reconciliation bill. People need to remember the reconciliation package just needs 51 votes in the Senate, so we can, with 53 senators, pass something very good. And the Democrats can't filibuster reconciliation. But the cost or the limit on a reconciliation package is you can only make spending go up or down and taxes go up and down. You can't change laws. You can't reform welfare. You can cut the amount of money. And so these are very, very important opportunities. And we can build the money for a wall and for border security in the same package as a tax cut. There's no reason to have two vessels. One bus leaves at one day, another bus leaves another day. You have an argument about what goes into each one. Everybody's going to want to be in the first bus. Nobody's going to want to be in the second bus. That alone will take weeks to work out. And there are pieces of immigration that aren't 100% agreed to.
Right.
So that's going to take some time. And I think we can get the wall and the border security stuff done at the same time that we take the successful pro-growth Trump tax cuts and extend them. We're going to lose expensing, which makes it easier for businesses to create new jobs. That goes away if we don't act soon. And it's not good enough to do it before the year ends. Businessmen make decisions now that take effect in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. The Trump tax cuts in 2017 got delayed almost a full year for all the same things that some people are suggesting. Now let's do this, let's do this, trying to put things into the package that couldn't legally be there because they were changing laws. And it didn't get signed until December 22nd, 2017. And the recovery happened the year after Republicans lost control of the House of Representatives. 40 seats they lost. 40 seats they lost.
It's too big a risk. It
was delayed.
It's just too big a risk. The other thing, Grover, the idea, look, I spoke to some very senior Republicans in the Senate who are pushing this idea of several reconciliation bills. They think they're going to get a border bill. I don't know, maybe the defense goes in there, other things. They're going to get that in a couple of weeks in January. No, they're not. You know that. It will take a goodly while to put together even a smaller bill. I mean, again, I use this continuing resolution fiasco as an example. And that's why I say simplify, simplify, simplify. One bill. walk and chew gum at the same time, okay? They could get a bill out that has all this stuff in it, maybe April, May, okay, June, that's fine. But to your point, that would, first of all, would put money in people's pockets. It would assure them that they would keep the standard deduction and the kiddie credit and the small business deduction, which you point out is so important. Individual people, middle-class people, it's worth, what, a couple $1,000, $2,000, $3,000? That's a lot of money with a 20% Biden inflation problem, right? And put it in with the border stuff. The heavy lifting on the border, Grover, I don't mean to filibuster you, but here's one last point. The heavy lifting on the border is, yes, they need money for the wall and ICE agents, okay, but they can do a lot of executive, the Trump's original executive orders, which Biden repealed, can be reinstated. And nobody, right, these orders include if you cross the border, that is illegal, and you can be, you're a criminal. We can throw you out. And they already have authority to do that. They can make executive authority, and that includes the sanctuary city problem. The laws on the books already permit ICE to go into the sanctuary cities. You see my point? We don't need right away. We can deal with the border issue, and I want to close the border too. I think you do as well. But that's, you're not going to get a big, some kind of bill in January. I'm sorry.
Well, and to those people who say, oh, this is an easy thing to do.
Right.
I have politely asked, show me the bill.
Right. Right.
Show me the bill.
Yes.
Oh, we don't have it yet. There was somebody from a prestigious conservative think tank in D.C. Explaining to other people that this very long, complicated law that they wanted to pass, that hasn't been passed, could be put into reconciliation, and that they were just wrong. They had no idea what this is exactly the sort of thing that people misunderstand what reconciliation is. You can't change laws. As you point out, we really don't need to change much in the way of laws.
That's
Trump
right.
used executive orders quite well. They said they were undone by Biden. Well, you can do them again.
Grover Norquist, the best of the best Americans tax term. Thanks, Grover. Appreciate it. A quick break, and then we're going to look at Israel and Ukraine with Ambassador Robert O'Brien. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Let's have a look at foreign policy. Let's have a look at Iran, which is the progenitor of the problems in the Middle East and elsewhere, and what Israel has done to destroy the Iranian proxies, and what President Trump might be able to do to take out the Iranian problem altogether. We welcome back my very dear friend, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor and Chairman of American Global Strategies. Robert, thank you for doing this. Welcome back. Looking at this story, so stepping back, Israel has basically destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon. They basically destroyed Hamas. I know they have to finish the job, but they basically destroyed Hamas in Gaza. Syria now, Assad is gone to Moscow. I don't know what the new gang is going to do in Syria, but Syria was a buffer zone for Iran. That buffer zone is gone. So my question to you is, if you're thinking about what President Trump might wish to do to this troublemaker called Iran, major troublemaker, they are so weakened right now from what Israel has done and so forth. Will a strong blow be struck? There's rumors that Israel will take out the Iranian nuclear facilities, which I think would be fabulous. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, Larry, great to be with you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends. It's a great season because, as you pointed out, Israel has done the West and America a great favor. They took out Nasrallah and Hezbollah in Lebanon. They take out the butcher of Damascus, Assad, because Assad would not have fallen had Israel not destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they basically taken out Hamas, although we need to get the hostages back that are still in the tunnels in Gaza. But Iran is now weakened and is wide open for attack. I mean, the Israelis, keep in mind also, Larry, the Israelis have taken out all the Iranian air defenses with their two airstrikes that they've done over the past six months. So Iran is wide open. It's time to take out the nuclear facilities. And if I was Iran, I'd be very nervous with President Trump coming back into office. The first thing I did was the Iranians, not that they would ever listen to me, they hate me, but the first thing they should do is announce they're ending their nuclear program, invite inspectors to come in and forestall an attack. But they probably won't be that smart.
Do you think that people, so you've got in place Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, your old spot, good man, I think you'd agree, strong.
Great guy. Marco
Rubio, State Department, strong. I believe Pete Hegseth will get confirmed, strong. So there's no weakness in the national security team. John Ratcliffe, CIA, very, very strong. I mean,
at least Stefanik at the UN, very strong.
That's right. Sorry, at least Stefanik, very, very strong, particularly on these matters. Absolutely. Strike while the iron is hot. Mr. Trump enjoys unprecedented honeymoon popularity, and you just have this continuing problem. Israel has done the West and the United States an amazing favor by destroying these terrorist groups in Syria and Iran. I mean, what do you do here? You can reimpose the sanctions that we had, that the first term had on Iran, bankrupt them. But, I mean, the nuclear story, I think somebody's got to take it out. I mean, you're the expert, but, I mean, if you really want to save Middle East and really destroy Iran, I mean, somebody's got to take out the nuclear facilities, whether it's Israel or the United States. Somebody's got to do it, Robert.
No, 100%, Larry. And look, it really weakens the axis of evil. It weakens the Russians, it weakens the Chinese, it weakens the North Koreans. So, and Iran is the weakest link in this axis right now. They have no air defenses. They're wide open, and it's time for America and Israel to strike and strike hard. Look, we have to decide if we want victory. And Bibi Netanyahu did something very interesting. The prime minister, he decided he was going to avoid the Biden appeasement, the Biden non-escalation, the Biden non-provoking policy, and he wanted victory. And he wanted victory against Hezbollah. He destroyed the entire Hezbollah leadership from Nasrallah down. He destroyed the entire Hamas leadership, and he's basically opened up Iran, so that Iran has no defenses to a Western attack now. And think about this, Larry. If he hadn't chosen victory, and if he'd done what Biden wanted him to do, Bashar al-Assad would still be in Syria. Nasrallah would still be running Hezbollah in Lebanon and firing missiles at Israel. And Sinwar would still be running Hamas with Western legitimacy in Gaza. I mean, it's quite striking the contrast between Biden and Netanyahu. And now we have a big contrast between Trump and Biden, and that contrast. And keep in mind, Iran has threatened to kill the president. They threatened to kill President Trump. They've threatened to kill his family, and they've threatened to kill his senior advisors. And they've done this publicly with the videos and exquisite propaganda. They even said at the UN, the Iranian leader came last year to the UN and said, we're going to kill everyone involved in the Soleimani operation, starting with President Trump. So the Iranians have been very provocative here, and have told President Trump they're coming after him. It's time for President Trump to do what Bibi Netanyahu did and just eliminate the Iranian threat once and for all, and that will stop nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. Because if the Iranians get a bomb, the Saudis are going to want to bomb, the Emiratis are going to want to bomb, the Turks are going to want to bomb, the Egyptians are going to want to bomb. I mean, we're going to have a massive nuclear arms race in the Middle East, in the most volatile area in the world, because we haven't taken care of the Iran problem. And so I think it's time now for America, for Israel, but also for our Sunni allies to just get together and say, Iran, you're done.
And so what I'm thinking is a joint U.S.-Israel strike force operation. I mean, you might start by restoring the real sanctions, which Biden took off. You might start that, but I mean, I see air power. Again, I am not the expert. You're the expert, But you could have joint U.S.-Israeli air power strikes on their nuclear facilities because, Robert, nothing else is going to work, right? No deals, no peace treaties, nothing will ever work because they just keep, each year improving their nuclear capacity. That's what I'm thinking. And so you just have to destroy it.
Well, and you saw this with North Korea when Clinton and Bush, passed on the opportunity to take out the North Korean nuclear sites. Now North Korea is a full nuclear power with a massive nuclear arsenal, and that option is over.
Wow.
But it still exists for Iran, and if we don't take advantage of it quickly, and speaking of air power, this is not putting troops on the ground. This is not trying to create democracy in Iran. This is not a forever war. This is a very surgical raid, which we can do with our B-1 bombers, with our B-2 bombers, with our B-52 bombers, and with all the Israeli, strike craft. This is a 2 or 3 night operation that eliminates the opportunity for the Iranians to ever get a nuclear weapon. And it's probably got to be done. It's probably got to be done soon. And then used in combination with massive sanctions. We put the Iranians back in the box. Keep in mind, the Iranians asked for this. The Iranians have enriched nuclear, material past not just the JCPOA, the Obama nuclear deal. They violated the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They've violated all their obligations, and so it's time for the international community. And perhaps it's more than just Israel and the U.S. Perhaps the Arab countries get involved as well, and just tell the Iranians, "You're not getting a bomb."
Would France? We won't
have a nuclearized Middle East.
Is it conceivable France would join us?
It is conceivable, and it's conceivable the UK would as well. If we tell the French and the British that we're going in, they may not like it, but I think they would join up with the U.S. and Israel if they knew we were going in strong, and we weren't taking half measures like have been done in the past, but we're going in and fully eliminate the nuclear program. I think we get Western support. As you say,
you're not putting troops on the ground. You're not remaking the country for democracy. This would not be a hit on civilian areas. This would be a hit on their nuclear areas. I mean,
and this is not another forever war. We're not trying to turn Iran into Sweden. We're not going to put American kids from Arkansas and Oklahoma and Utah. We're not going to have them patrolling the streets of Tehran. This is going to be a massive aerial bombardment that totally eliminates our nuclear program.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, look, you are the expert. I am not, Robert O'Brien, but I'm just saying it just makes a lot of sense. And I think timing is everything in these things. And, Israel, what they have done, basically saving the West, maybe saving the world from Iran and their terrorism. I mean, we owe Israel a debt of thanks instead of these, crazy anti-Semitic people and so forth and so on. But again, Mr. Trump has tremendous wind at his back politically right now. I call it strike while the iron is hot, not only for foreign policy, but things like tax cuts and the border and so forth and so on. And I just wonder, in the next few months, I mean, look what he said. If you don't release the hostages, Hamas, they'll be hell to pay. You got running out of time, Robert O'Brien. You got 30 seconds on that. Hell to pay if you don't release the hostages.
Hey, my advice to Hamas is let the hostages go immediately, because it's going to be you're going to face the al-Baghdadi situation. You're any Hamas leaders going to wake up with a Belgian Malwa named Koonin, coming down the tunnel after them if they don't release the American hostages. It's time to let them go. And you're right. President Trump has an opportunity to strike a blow, just like he did. Remember Syria at the beginning of the last administration when he restored the red line that Obama gave up on, and it struck Syria with missiles. And that set the tone for the whole administration. We had no new wars because they knew President Trump was strong. This is a chance to do what he did to Syria at the beginning and restore a red line with the Iranians on the nuclear program.
Fabulous. That's right. Over chocolate cake dessert with Xi Jinping.
You were there.
Actually, no, I wasn't. I came about 2 months later. I missed it. I've had the chocolate cake, Robert, but I missed, and I've been to the she dinners and lunches, but I missed that one. Anyway, folks, we're talking to my very dear friend, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, who's a former national security advisor. His great new company is American Global Strategies. Robert, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's to you and everybody else in your family. Thanks very much, folks. We're going to take a break.
Thank you, Larry.
We're going to talk about energy and why we need an all-of-the-above strategy, and we got to unlock liquid gold with the brilliant physicist Steve Koonin. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
Larry Kudlow. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
So, one of the other decisions President Trump's going to have, and I don't think it's a hard decision, is pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement and stopping all of these extreme, crazy Green New Deal concoctions. Climate change is a religion. It's not a science. And I love to bring in our next guest, Steve Koonin, because I like to sell his book, which has been out for a while. The book is Unsettled, What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters. Steve Koonin's former Obama administration Energy Department chief scientist. I think he's still teaching school at NYU here in New York, and he's a senior fellow at Hoover Institute. Steve Koonin, did I get that right? You still teaching at NYU?
No, I resigned NYU in September, and I'm now full-time at Hoover.
All right. Well, that's probably much more profitable. Anyway, his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week, The Right Way for Trump to Ditch the Paris Agreement. Steve Koonin, before you even get to that, you know, in the last days of the current administration, Biden administration, they are trying to end all exports, all U.S. exports of LNG, liquid natural gas. I cannot think of anything stupider. And I ask you, what's this all about?
Yeah, I would agree with you, of course, about the stupidity of it. The U.S. has enormous potential to produce natural gas and sell it to the rest of the world to meet their energy needs. I think, what it is the anti-fossil fuel, climate-driven ideology that we saw hints of in the 2020 election, and everybody said, no, they're not serious. But in fact, it's turned out that the administration is really quite anti-hydrocarbon, which, again, given that it provides 80-some-odd% of the world's energy, being against fossil fuels is just completely nuts.
And again, on this LNG business, Steve, look, natural gas is a clean-burning fuel. If I'm not mistaken, the European Union, which at one point was completely crazed about fossil fuels, actually reclassified natural gas as a clean-burning fuel. We should do likewise here, but it doesn't matter because it is. So if we were selling it around the world to Europe, for example, or even to China, I know they're our adversary, wouldn't that, we would make the world cleaner. We would make the climate cleaner.
Of course we would, and provide energy to the world. I guess one argument against it is that by having the ability to export the gas, you will raise domestic prices because gas is much more expensive elsewhere. And if you start siphoning off U.S. gas to go abroad, that could in principle raise the domestic price. But in fact, when you talk to people in the business, exactly the opposite would occur.
Yes, we just produce more. The trick here is to increase production, keep prices down, for heaven's sake. So I'm reading from your big piece about getting out of the Paris Accord. Washington's goal should be energy for all. Providing affordable and reliable energy, no matter the source, would do far more good for humanity than discouraging fossil fuels based on fear of some vague climate catastrophe. I love that. You're an expert I mean, you're a nuclear physicist, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
some vague climate catastrophe, which has never come.
No, and when you ask people, who are alarmed, the experts, what are you afraid of? It's a very difficult to get any answer. Some people say more droughts, other people say more floods, storms, sea level going up, at some tremendous rate. None of that has happened. We cannot find any climate trends in extreme weather events at all.
I mean, the data just never supported these extreme warnings. Never.
No, it's all about models that are not fit for purpose, as the experts would say. Yeah. And so you can get any answer you want out of the models.
So on the constructive side, it just seems to me the base load energy for the next 50 or 100 years is natural gas, and you have this in your thing, small modular fission reactors and better batteries. I mean, I love this idea that you have these little nuclear modular fission things and natural gas. Those are the base load, clean burning fuels, aren't they?
Yes, and when you look at people who have to confront energy reality every day, they will come to exactly that same conclusion. Eric Schmidt, the Google chairman, or Alphabet now, as it's called, when I came out with my book, I think he thought it was the devil's work.
Yes.
But then he writes a piece a couple of months ago that says, well, to power AI, we're going to have to burn gas. So it's okay to not save the planet if you're running AI, for example.
Well, look, the demand for electricity is going to skyrocket, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Some people say as much as 15-20% in the next 5 years when you look at tremendous energy cost that goes into training these AI models.
So you're going to need something to power electricity, and it's not going to be offshore windmills. Sorry.
No, because none of that is reliable. And what's going to happen for the data centers in the next 5 years is they're going to build gas turbines. And you can do that in a few years. The gas is there, and it's fine. Longer term, they're starting to seriously invest and engage with the small reactor people. And eventually it'll be small reactors.
Well, I think President Trump's administration will promote these small reactors. I mean, I know they're going to promote fossil fuels and they're going to promote natural gas, but I think they will, Steve Koonin. Have you heard?
His nominee for Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, whom I know, is in fact a fan of small reactors.
Why don't you go into the administration? I tried to pull you in 4 or 5 years ago.
No, I mean, you know what it's like to be inside the government.
All right.
I did that for 2.5 years. It was enough.
The book is called Unsettled: What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't. Steve Koonin's terrific stuff. We'll take a break and then stock market work after this.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
So, welcome back, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is the Larry Kudlow Show. By the way, you can hear this show on the internet. You can live stream us. LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. Hear us all across the country, around the world, throughout the solar system, including the Milky Way. And please, during the week, join us on fabulous Fox Business Network. Name of the show is Kudlow, 4 to 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. And if for some crazy reason you can't get to us at 4, well, don't despair. Just text your favorite 9-year-old, and she will show you how to DVR the show. You'll never miss a thing. Never miss a thing. Stock market. Oh, my gosh. What's going on here? Roller coaster week. Actually, it was another down week. And we had at one point, I think 10 or 11 straight days where the Dow Jones continued to decline. Weird stuff from the Fed. Weird stuff in Washington. let's talk. David Bahnsen, dear friend, Bahnsen Group, CIO, founder and managing partner, author of thedividendcafe.com and his most recent work, Full Time, Work and the Meaning of Life. Just a wonderful book. And my dear friend Nancy Tengler, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Laffer Tengler Investments. And Nancy's latest book is The Women's Guide to Successful Investing. So, Nancy Tengler, start with you. I almost said, what should women do? But, that would be wrong. I mean, I'll get tremendous emails on that one. What should people
do? Not from me.
What should people do? I mean, here's the fact. By the way, just to have some fun here. On Wednesday, so Jerome Powell gets up there and says, inflation is worse than we thought. It's going to be longer. So I'm cutting interest rates. And the market falls 1,100 points, which I just kind of read as a big vote of no confidence in Jay Powell, period, full stop. I mean, let's just start with that. What'd you make of that story?
Yeah, I mean, and it's about time. I think I wrote a piece in 2023 called "It's Time to Replace the Fed with Chat GPT," because at least AI learns from its mistakes. And I think this Fed has been so consistently wrong and so not humble about being wrong. And so consequently, we hear this phrase and the reporters repeat it when they ask their questions, the data dependent phrase. But it seems to me the only data they're dependent on is the Fed funds futures, because the actions, as you point out, make no sense. You don't lower rates if you think that inflation is sticky, and it is, even though we got a decent core PCE later in the week. But core X food and energy, that's not how Americans live. And so, they actually have to buy food and energy. So I think it's time for an overhaul, for a return to common sense and a mute button, because all of the Fed governors are out talking. That creates expectations in the market, and then they don't want to disappoint the market, which is exactly the wrong way to manage Fed policy. So I don't even listen anymore. I mean, I did listen, but I'm amazed at the gobbledygook and the lack of coherence and the flip-flops within the same press conference. So I think you shut that aside and you pay attention to what's going on in Washington, but most importantly, what's going on in corporate earnings. And that's going to be a pretty decent story.
Yeah. Profits have sustained this market for quite some time. I mean, profits have sustained this market for, 7, 8 years, maybe longer. I personally think Jay Powell should resign. I think that we have a new president, new administration, new Treasury Secretary, et cetera. He should resign. Let Trump put Kevin Warsh in there. That's what I think the game plan is going to be. Warsh is a Federal Reserve veteran. He was a governor for many years, including during the financial crisis. And he's a very, very smart guy. And maybe most importantly, he's a logical guy. I mean, here's the thing. So David Bahnsen was on set that crucial day, and I had this long riff, and I knew what was coming. He agreed with me about delaying the tax cuts. He agreed with me about how silly the Fed is being. And then, of course, I knew this was coming. He said the only thing I think he called the riff brilliant, except for the fact that I called for passive investing. I love that. And he just jumped right on it. So, David Bahnsen.
We all hate that.
I know. I know. Some of my best friends are active and you're all very good at it. I didn't say, I said I respect people who disagree with me. But, Bahnsen, I want to ask you something important, because not only did stocks revolt from Jay Powell, but bonds did too. Ed Yardeni's bond vigilantes have run the 10-year back to, I got 453 on Friday, whatever. Bonds, I think, got as low when they had the jumbo rate cut. Running into that, it was as low as about 350 or something, and then they're up. So it's up almost 100 points, and that has affected mortgage rates also. So the bond market is very unhappy with the Fed also, David Bahnsen.
Well, so Larry, first I just want to say that I'd be far more open to the passive investing idea if you would just call it NVIDIA, which apparently is all that it really is. It's just one large over-concentrated play. But, you know, the weightings in the passive world have changed a lot over the years, but I see your point. Look, Larry, the thing with the Fed, I agree with 9 out of 10 things that Nancy just said. I do want to point out that I don't believe it's Jay Powell's fault that we have asked the Fed to please provide us full employment and price stability. That is not the job of 12 PhDs. I agree that the Fed is arrogant, but I think it is institutionally arrogant. I agree that the mandate is crazy and that there are mixed signals. I don't expect the Fed to say the truth here, which is that they do believe that there's some sticky prices staying higher, and yet actually the only way to get those prices lower is to cut rates because housing is frozen and they can't get housing to reset until rates come down that they created by their own extreme policy on the low side and then extreme on the high side. They created the stickiness in housing. But Larry, if we want to talk about incoherence, I think Nancy will agree with me. What's more incoherent than saying we're cutting rates and we're doing quantitative tightening?
Right.
They have one hand tightening and one hand loosening.
Right.
All if they want easier policy, then stop reducing the balance sheet. Now they need to reduce the balance sheet because they let it go too high. So this is where the 9 out of 10 comes in my agreement with you and Nancy. All of this is a byproduct of the Fed dealing with imperfect choices around past mistakes. That's all monetary policy has been my entire life. Is the central banks cleaning up past mistakes that they've made.
Yeah.
And I think I am a Hayekian to the core. That no one has the knowledge to do this. No central planner can take on the stewardship of the full economy. I know who can set interest rates right. It's called borrowers and lenders, buyers and sellers. That is the optimal monetary policy. We brought in central planning, and I'm a little bit less mad at Jay Powell for the way he does it than I am for the fact that we have asked a central bank to do something that can't be done.
Well, I don't know, maybe so. But the point is, as I quoted Robert Mundell that day, who was a Nobel Prize winner and brilliant man, the late Robert Mundell, who said, if you want to curb inflation, that's a monetary issue. You need a strong dollar and minimal money growth. If you want to promote economic growth in the economy, promote better growth from the supply side, that's a fiscal issue, and you should be lowering tax rates. It was very simple, and it was kind of like tight money and tax cuts. And so let's take the housing thing. All right, there are regulatory issues with housing. Some are federal, but most are state and local regulatory issues. But insofar as mortgage rates go, and insofar as interest rates in general, David, the best way to get rates down is to curb their high-powered balance sheet. Get inflation expectations down. He doesn't talk that language. He does not talk that language because he doesn't understand it. And he's a nice guy, by the way. I'm not attacking him personally. I know Jay quite well. Lord knows we had so many lunches when I was in the government for 3 years. But the balance sheet is still $7 trillion. Yeah. Okay. 15 years ago, it was less than $1 trillion. Yeah. They need to get it down. And it isn't. People say if the Fed lets bonds run off, mortgage-backed bonds, treasury bonds, that will cause rates to go up. I completely disagree. That will bring rates down. The Fed should talk about how they'll be withdrawing excess money. They don't need it. And then lower inflation expectations will bring the mortgage rate here. I have Freddie Mac mortgage rate 7.29. Okay, that's crazy. That too is up 100 basis points since the jumbo rate cut. That's what they need to do. And they do that, we'll all live happily ever after. I mean, that's all they need to do. And I agree with you about the central planning, of course. But I'm just saying, tighten up your money supply, tighten up your balance sheet. That will less money, less demand, and let the supply side policies of tax cuts and deregulation promote economic growth. You'll have more goods and services chasing less money, and there you have it. Prosperity.
This goes back to the perfect speech you gave the other day on air. I agree with you 100%. The look, but again, the balance sheet was $5 trillion when Jay got there. Okay, so this is what I mean by we're constantly having to clean up from the past generation's mistakes. Bernanke wrote a book doing a victory lap as to how well QE went to get out of financial crisis, but the balance sheet was still at the peak.
Yep.
It's like celebrating doing your victory lap before the race is over.
Yep.
Jay did get $2 trillion off the balance sheet in the last couple of years. I didn't think he'd be able to get that much off without more disruption in financial markets. You're exactly right. 3 out of 3 times when they began reducing the balance sheet, rates went down, not up.
Yep.
So that will happen again. But ultimately, the Fed funds rate cannot be at 4.5 and get mortgage rates back down to something, let's call it halfway between the lows and the highs we've seen. And that's the issue. You're right. But this also connects what Nancy said earlier. I think she's right that core inflation versus headline is not helpful to real people. But I do think it's an important distinction for the Fed, because I don't believe the interest rate has anything to do with the price of money, price of oil whatsoever.
Well, the thing is.
They can't control state and local regulations. They can't control oil. The money supply and supply side issues. Milton Friedman meets Friedrich Hayek. Meets Larry Kudlow and Art Laffer. That's the key for.
And stick Mundell in there, because he was so important, and he was at Chicago with Milton, of course. I knew him very well, the late Mundell. You're right. The Fed funds rate is the most overhyped thing in all policy. It's just overhyped. It's just a big nothing burger, and you've got 300-400 PhDs who all give their political donations to Democrats who have completely rejiggered what monetary policy should look like. Anyway, the stock market's still not in bad shape. I mean, what do we got? 42,000 Dow, almost a 43,000 Dow, and a almost 6,000 S&P 500. So that ain't bad. Let me take a quick break, and we'll come back with some recommendations. By the way, Nancy Tengler's always right. I've learned that down through the years. There's no question about that. Nancy Tengler, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Laffer Tengler, and Dave Bonson, founder and managing director of the Bonson Group. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show.
We're talking stocks with two of the best, Nancy Tengler, CEO and CIO of Laffer Tengler Investments, Dave Bonson, the Bonson Group, CIO, founder, and managing partner. Dave's book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. I love to push it because it's an important book. Okay, Nancy Tengler, I have been and am still worried about delaying the tax cuts as a negative influence on stocks, because the Dow went down 9 straight days before the goofy Fed thing. I know that profits are very decent, so profits are the mother's milk of stocks. How do you see this now? How would you recommend an investment strategy? We just got a couple minutes left because we went long in the first segment.
Okay. Well, I agree with you. I'm worried about that, too, the tax cuts. But I just wrote a piece recently called Youth and Inexperience, and I used Ronald Reagan's quote that he wouldn't make age for political purposes. He wouldn't exploit Mondale's age, because, people are asking me that question. And so the average age of a portfolio manager is 40 to 45 years, and they mostly work at hedge funds. And that's what's driving volatility. But if you take a step back and you look at what's going to drive the economy, it is productivity. And I've been harping on this for 2 years now. We are in a productivity-driven growth environment, just like the 90s. And in that period, we coexisted with higher interest rates and higher inflation. Fed funds rate came into the decade at 8, went out at 5 in the 90s. And so we like names that are going to benefit from that. Broadcom is a name we were buying in 2018. It's up 1,200%. Can it go up more? Yes, it can. And the reason is because they're in the sweet spot of AI on not just the chip side, but on the software side. ServiceNow is another one. The CEO came out last week and said he expects AI spending to be $20 trillion between now and the end of the decade.
Wow.
That stock's up 300%. And then Amazon, since the IPO, that stock's up 275,000%. And so when was it too late? In many of these names, it's never too late. So those are our kind of stocks.
And Jeff Bezos is a Trump convert. Yes, David Bahnsen, I got about 80 seconds. What do you make of it?
Well, look, I agree with Nancy on Broadcom. It's funny. I always think that she and I have so much in common, and we both bought Broadcom in 2018. So great minds think alike. Huh. It's been amazing. And I just want to add, it's the dividend growth of Broadcom. Our yield, cash on cash, is 30% per year from what we originally paid for it, even though now it's only a current yield of 1%. With this AI stuff, if you want to de-risk some of the names, because there's going to be a lot that succeed and a lot that fail, but boy, companies with cash flow that are returning some of it to you, those are a lot safer ways to play speculative aspects of the market.
It's energy companies. We were talking to Steve Koonin before in the prior segment, the brilliant physicist on climate. We're going to need a lot of electricity, David. A lot.
Yeah.
So how about some of these big energy companies that pay dividends?
Well, I think it's a great play, but you're going to need a few things. You're going to need pipelines. You're going to move natural gas to the places they're going to power the electricity, because you're not getting electricity without natty gas. And that is the biggest aspect. Biden was a good president for Chevron and Exxon because he didn't let anybody else produce, and so they got all the money for production.
All right.
But Trump is a great natural gas president.
All right.
People will see.
Nancy Tengler, thank you. David Bahnsen, thank you. Folks, quick break. We're going to do some money and politics with David Asman and John McLaughlin. I'm Kudlow. Stick around. Much more.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Larry Kudlow.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is Protecting Your Future, sponsored by the Colonial Metals Group and its great CEO, Mr. Paul Stone. And today we're talking about protecting your future by keeping a sharp eye on money and politics. And we've got two wonderful people here. Terrific stuff. My dear friend, David Asman, great news anchor for both Fox News and Fabulous Fox Business. David Asman and I once tried to reform the entire country of Argentina. Maybe there's a replay going on. And my brother, John McLaughlin, ace pollster and strategic consultant, CEO of McLaughlin and Associates. By the way, John, Jim McLaughlin was great on the TV show last night. He was really, really great. So.
Yes, he told me I look good on radio.
you have a face for radio. I get it.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to work off of, let's see, two pieces here if I can get this right. My piece was a lesson for the GOP, simplify, simplify, simplify. And John and Jim McLaughlin's piece up at Newsmax, Americans support Trump tax cuts, pass them first. You and I are both saying the same thing. All right, John, lead us off, because the polling for tax cuts is incredibly important. And what we learned in this crazy continuing resolution fight the last 3-4 days is how chaotic politics are going to be, including politics in the House. So let's just have one reconciliation bill with tax cuts, right?
Right. Plus the importance is getting it done as soon as possible. Because I'm coming at it from a political view, you're coming at it from a policy view, but the idea of passing the tax cuts, you went through this with Reagan. I used to work for Arthur Finkelstein with Reagan. The tax cuts didn't take effect till 1983, and we lost 26 House seats in the midterms. Trump, the first time he served as president, they did health care first because Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan told them they needed the savings to get the tax cuts passed. Where did they get savings from? I mean, tax cuts it's money that belongs to us, not them. And finally, when Trump got around to doing it, we lost in the midterms, lost both houses. And when we lost both houses, he got impeached and bad things happened. But the tax cuts were going into effect in 2019 and 2020. We had great polling for him. In fact, on March 11th, I went to the White House, met with him in the Oval, and I saw you there that day because the polls all had President Trump ahead. And President Trump, he greeted us by saying, I think I have to shut travel down Europe because of COVID.
Yeah.
And
that was March of 2020. March of 2020. Fateful day. But he had to do it. He was right.
And I said to him, that's too bad because these polls have you ahead.
Yep.
We need to get that economic growth back because right now in this polling, you have 71% of the voters support no tax on tips. You have 82% support no tax on Social Security. By the way, 72% of Democrats, 66% support the no tax on overtime, 59% among Democrats, and making the 2017 jobs no tax cut and jobs act permanent. You've got 70% of all voters approving of that. 58% of Democrats use that political capital right away to get growth, so we could hold our majorities in the midterms, make them bigger. But we don't get it done, and we don't have economic growth. Historically, those midterms are not a good election for the party at the White House.
Somebody turn the radio down, or there's some noise in the background. David Asman, let me make one point. The making the Trump tax cuts permanent. Now, the corporate tax is permanent, but he wants to drop it to 15. It's a good idea. But making them permanent in the individual taxes, here's my point, will not cost anything. It will increase revenues as it increases growth. What you think?
I think you're just citing history. I mean, we saw it, of course, we saw it with JFK. You wrote a book about it. We saw it with Reagan. You were there. And we saw it with Trump in 2017. From 2017 until now, not only did the tax cuts not cost anything, we have increased revenue 48% since the Trump tax cuts went into effect in 2017. Increased by $1.5 trillion. The irony, though, and you and I have talked about this on television, you have written about it as well, is that in many ways, some of our biggest obstacles to getting this done first thing in January 20th, the extension of the tax cuts, are Republicans. Democrats we knew would be against it just because they're reflexively against anything that Trump would do. But there are too many Republicans who believe that tax cuts, even the 2017 tax cuts that we know didn't cost anything but gained 48% increase in revenue, even though we know that, they believe that tax cuts cost money, and it has to be worked into the budget as a cost. That's the interesting thing that happened this week. In fact, I just read this Axios piece came out today, I guess, that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat, the leader of the Democrats in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, maybe once is working with Trump to kill the debt ceiling. Now, of course, Democrats want to kill the debt ceiling in order to spend more money, but the debt ceiling was an impediment to extending the tax cuts because these number crunchers inside the Beltway continued with the refrain that tax cuts cost money, so you have to have offsets, you have to have pay-fors in terms of lowering. But that's not, as we know, that's a static analysis. It doesn't take into account what has happened every time there has been a major tax cut going back to the 1920s. But if Trump pulls this off, it would be something. Of course, Hakeem Jeffries has a lot up his sleeve, so be very careful. Be very careful with who you're dealing with. But it's a very interesting development here.
I would get rid of the debt ceiling. I said that on the air. I wrote about it. Get rid of it. It doesn't have anything to do with getting rid of spending. It's irrelevant. There's no teeth to it. All it is throwing sand in the gears for Trump's agenda. It's going to come up again. This whatever the deal was that they voted on last night. They're saying the debt ceiling will expire in March. They don't know, but it's just nonsense. It just allows Democrats to start in this government shutdown mode, and it's all going to get in the way of Trump's agenda. But I want to say, on the issue of revenues, the guy who has the story right, fabulously right, is Mike Crapo, Senator Mike Crapo from Idaho, who is the incoming chairman as of Jan 3rd of the Senate Finance Committee, which will write the bill. The other guy is Jason Smith, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, who will write the bill in the House. Both of those guys believe in something called a current policy baseline, which simply means extending ongoing tax cuts, doesn't cost anything. You don't have to reprice it out. It's just like the current services spending baseline. That thing goes on forever. Spending always goes up. Nobody calls it a big impediment to, worse, higher deficits. Same thing. Taxes should be scored the same way as spending. Crapo has it right. Jason Smith has it right. Now, to John McLaughlin, Jason Smith wants one reconciliation bill. Okay? And to John McLaughlin, I'm going to add to this, and you'll understand my language. Sources close to Mr. Trump believe Mr. Trump, wants what he calls it, one big, beautiful reconciliation bill. One big, sources close to him, okay, if you read my meaning. So
yes, sir.
It's there. It's just a question of getting, let's get John Thune on board and some of the senators and some of the other members of the new administration, John McLaughlin. You got to go in there yourself with your polls.
Well, by the way, I will. And at the same time, you wrote a great column in The Sun that I'll make sure that you all say. And John Thune, in 1996, I worked for Senator, he was then Citizen Thune, and he was running for Congress, and we were losing 2-1, and we ended up with a big primary win 2-1 because he was running on a reform agenda of tax cuts and term limits back in 96. So he knows.
John's a good guy. He's a fine guy. I spoke to him at some length this past week, and he was concerned about timing issues. How fast can you rustle up, a good tax bill? Okay. And I do think somewhat mistakenly, he thought, and other senators, that somehow you could get a first reconciliation bill with, border money and defense money, in a couple of weeks in January. That is not going to be true, John. That's what the CR epidemic just showed us. You follow my logic? The CR just showed you how hard it's going to be to get anything through the House that would pass the Senate. So John's a good man. He just needs to be persuaded that we can put the thing together in hopefully a couple of months.
Right. Well, if we could get it done in the House first,
yes,
then it should sail through the Senate because their majority's a little bigger. But they also have to do it in the beginning of this year. I mean, I agree with you, Larry. All the time when Donald Trump was running in 2016, and he said, "Do you think I need a tax cut bill?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Where did I get one?" I said, "You called Larry Kudlow."
Well,
he called you.
No, it worked. I mean, we got everybody's. Steve Moore was involved in the thing. Art Laffer was involved in the thing. Then we, brought in Steve Mnuchin and Steve Miller. Steve Miller is a pivotal guy. He's a good man, smart fellow, deputy chief of staff now. But again, I think he thinks you can get some kind of border bill through reconciliation fast. And I'm saying, forget that. Nothing's going to be fast. That's why you have to do. And the other thing is, to my friend David Asman, who knows economics very well, let's put more money in the pockets of middle income working folks, people. Okay. I mean, supply siders, we talk about lower marginal tax rates and the incentive effect, which is very important. They will work and invest. But in the basic sense, David Asman, let's put more money. I mean, you look at the numbers that McLaughlin has. Tax-free tips is so popular. Tax-free overtime is so popular. Put more money in their pockets this year, David Asman.
And that's what people voted for because they have seen the money in their pockets diminish over the past 4 years. I mean, it's clear, I don't want to get into a P match on what's more important, the border or the tax extensions. But the fact is it really is true that Trump closed the border in 2017 with executive orders,
right.
and Biden opened the border in 2021 with executive orders. So a lot of what needs to be done could be done by President Donald Trump by himself without having to go to Congress at all. So the focus could be more on the brain trust, which would include most of those people that were involved in your tax cut in 2017 could be brought together again, come out with a good bill and put it in. But again, you're right. The people of America, 77 million strong, and probably more now because Trump's popularity is greater than his margin during the actual election. So he's got the support of the American people behind him. And if they start feeling more cash in their pockets, it's going to turn around. And of course, the larger point or another point of that is when taxpayers, and we talked about it, when will the lesson be learned? When taxpayers keep more of what they earn, they work harder. Yep. They grow the economy. They create more revenue. And it's happened every time, going way back to the 1920s, the Mellon tax cuts, et cetera, and then JFK, and then Reagan, and of course in 2017. But it does change the whole economy, and it changes the attitude of the people. People become more positive. Investors think about investing more because they're more positive about the future.
I got to take a break. I want the blue collar boom to start this year.
Yes,
I don't want to wait. Blue collar boom start this year. I got to take a break. David Asman, news anchor for Fox News and Fox Business. John McLaughlin, ace pollster, both dear friends. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
Larry Kudlow. From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. We're talking politics with David Asman, Fox News and Fox Business, and John McLaughlin, ace pollster, CEO of McLaughlin and Associates. John McLaughlin, what do your polls tell you about spending? Because really, the Republicans too, pay-goes, offsets, pay-fors, you just don't hear any talk about that anymore. And the CR was no different. Honestly, we're going to have to restrain spending. We've got Elon Musk. We've got Vivek Ramaswamy. I call them the Doge brothers. But the GOP's got to do something about this. You know, they got to help Trump here.
Yes, because in the poll numbers I'm referring to on our website at McLaughlinOnline.com, 66% of all voters say the country's still on the wrong track. That was as of December 17th. They say the economy is getting worse, not better, 55-34, and 84% have been negatively impacted by inflation. 48% to the point right before Christmas, they can't afford basic necessities. So Washington is totally out of touch because they keep on spending. And the biggest tax increase we've had in the last 4 years is Biden inflation. By the way, Biden, 40 approve, 57 disapprove. Trump should not let him off the hook. He's leaving him a big mess because they don't want to stop spending now. They want to have a continuing resolution to keep spending, which triggers more inflation. So the average person out there, they want tax cuts, they want better jobs, they want economic growth, but they don't want to keep spending and keep having to pay the penalty of inflation. So it's going to be a really tough job.
You know, Dave Asman, I think that the GOP's got a messaging problem because they need to listen to what McLaughlin just said. They need to link spending cuts with Bidenflation. They may say, you want to conquer Bidenflation, let's start spending less. They never seem to get that messaging right.
Well, I think Elon Musk has got it. I think Vivek Ramaswamy have it. The Doge brothers, as you say, are keyed in on that, and John, I think they could use some of that information because that you have some of the recent polls because they know how to make that work. And there is this, I remember going way back. We talked about Argentina, which we were successful at, by the way. We did turn Argentina around
for a while.
They had 6 fat years, and then and look at Malay. I think we laid the groundwork for Malay, so we did okay there. But remember, there in the 80s, there was this battle between the Tories in England because Maggie Thatcher had taken over in 79, and then Reagan came in 81. They didn't believe in supply side. The Tories didn't believe in supply side. Right. They needed Reagan to show them the way. And here, there are a lot of Republicans who don't believe in the supply side. And obviously, you got to work the message on the people who are unhappy, the general public who are unhappy. And a lot of that can be done through mediums that didn't exist in the old days, like the X postings, etc. But you also have the Doge brothers, and they are going to not only do tax cuts work, and we have more examples of that now from what happened in 2017 than we did in the 1980s. Not only do tax cuts bring in more revenue, but we also have this major front of not only cost cutting from the Doge brothers, which I think they can get to $2 trillion pretty directly. I don't think it's an impossible climb at all to get to a save of $2 trillion, but also regulations, because regulations are a form of taxation. Right. And when you cut, and also when you cut regulations, you have more productivity. Productivity brings down inflation. Right. So there are different ways to lick the inflation bug. And
I'm just saying to John, particularly John McLaughlin, John, you should poll directly on this. But the trick is, look, for 4 years, Republicans have blamed Bidenflation on excess spending. Okay, that's good. All right. And I think that worked to a large extent. But now that the ball is in the GOP's court, we have the majorities, Republicans' majorities in the House and Senate. They've got to continue. They've got to say, look, Bidenflation is still out there. That's a problem. It really is. So we need to slay it once and for all. And yes, we're going to have supply side tax cuts and better productivity and deregulation, but they have just got to use that in order to end Bidenflation. They have to restrain spending. They must. I mean, I had Rand Paul on the TV show last night, and he said, "Did we really need $100 billion for hurricanes with no offsets? Did we really need $10 billion for farms with no offset?" I mean, he's right. Rand is exactly right. And the GOP's got to get some of that. I only got about 25 seconds left, but that's my point, John. You got a poll on it.
Exactly right. We have polled on it.
Oh.
And by the way, the Democrats have polled on it, and they got their message. Their message is these tax cuts are for billionaires, and the Republicans want to cut Social Security and Medicare.
That's great.
They're already coming right at us. We need to get smart real fast.
All right. Terrific stuff. John McLaughlin, Ace Pollster, thank you very much. My dear friend David Asman from Fox, thank you very much. Folks, I'm Kudlow. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next weekend.
An O'Reilly Auto Parts gift card is the perfect gift for that hard-to-buy-for person. Give the gift of convenience from O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.